Sayinzoga, if I could bring you in here. Daniel was just talking there about the widening gap between wealthier and poorer countries and sort of how this energy security resurgence has sort of played into that. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts you wanted to offer and how that feeds into your own experience.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. Can you hear me? Yes. I just wanted to pick up from where the Minister of Egypt has left off and the remarks by Mr. Boli. Many countries like my country, Rwanda, are actually ready. We are ready, we have an appetite for reforms to be able to tackle climate change. Rwanda was one of the first countries to embrace environmental challenges because of our topography, way before it became sexy on the international stage. We had no choice. First, it's a question of survival. We're not a polluting country, but we're definitely one of the most affected countries by climate change. If I look at the dialogue that we've been having under the RST with the IMF, it's very clear that at the heart of our inflation problem, at the heart of our macroeconomic problem is climate change. So we were one of the first countries to have a strategy, whether it's a climate strategy, an NDC strategy at the national level, or a national electrification plan for the energy sector more specifically. I think to the point made earlier, for some countries it's a question of substitution. You substitute fossil fuel with more, I would say, more sustainable sources of energy. For many countries like mine, it's a question of access. How do you ensure that your people actually have access to energy? 10 years ago, less than 10% of Rwandans had access to electricity, as an example. Today, we're at 61. How are we going to close the gap? Will we be able to close the gap with renewable energy? In this case, the choice that my country made is off-grid energy, or will we have to resort back to the old methods, which are the methods that we all know, which are not helping the planet? And the issue of climate finance is at the heart of this. With the support of the IMF, we've been able to identify what are the gaps that we need to close internally. With the support of some of the other development partners, such as the World Bank, we've been able to roll out off-grid solutions. But are we going to be able to do it at scale unless we address the issues that have been discussed in the last COP? And I hope I'll have an opportunity to talk about implementation and execution. But one of the key things is that the assumption is that countries are not ready. And my question today is, what about the countries that are ready? What are we doing to make sure that they become an example of what can be done? And my country is one such country. I'll give you one example. Recently, we had a big rollout program for access to electricity in rural areas, and we did a crowdfunding, literally on Twitter, on social media. I mean, my institution thought, okay, enough with expecting help from outside, let's get the social media on board and have what we call China Challenge. And we got enough money to connect more than 25,000 of the poorest and most remote households. So we know that even with countries that have limited means, there are local solutions. But are they going to be enough to bring scale and speed? Possibly not.
Just saying, Zoga, I don't know if you wanted to pick up on that, because there was a lot of talk there about, some of the shared ambitions and having projects ready.
So when we started the journey of climate finance, sourcing for climate finance, the underlying assumption was get prepared and it will come. And we believed it. We got prepared. We did the NDC, we got a check. We did the CCDR of the World Bank, check. Now we are doing the RST with the IMF, check. Political will, we've even banned plastic bags. If you come to Rwanda, you'll never meet a plastic bag as an example of a political will, check. They said, well, there's an issue with pipeline. The institution that I lead, the Development Bank of Rwanda, we went, we did studies, and we found a pipeline. $400 million, check. Now, we even put up a preparation fund to make sure that the pipeline is dynamic, that it's not a static pipeline. Now, the question that we ask ourselves is, will it come? Because if you look at where we started this conversation a couple years ago, as BRD, as a development bank, I could source money at 3%, right? This was back then, pre-2019, and we all thought that green finance would be affordable and attractive. So if I could source money at 3% on international markets or on DFI, from DFI credit lines, I would add a swap cost, because of course I have a foreign exchange exposure of about 6%. That takes you to 9%. I have a small margin as a bank, maybe 3 to 4%. That gets you to about like 9, 12, 13% to the end beneficiary. In my country, the interest rate on the market for non-green projects is 16%. So you can be competitive. Fast forward to today, I cannot find money at 3%. So I am finding money at probably something closer to 6.5%. I still have my swap cost, and I still have my margin. So what does it mean? Am I going to approach a local private sector agent of Rwanda with a product, a lending product that is more expensive for green finance than for non-green finance? Does that add up? It doesn't add up. So the next question is, how do I make it affordable for the local private sector? And what we have been told over and over is that if you prepare, concessional financing is available, right? So here we get to the concessional financing discussion, and we say, where? Is it the bilaterals? Well, some have shown some interest. Is it IDA? And then if it's IDA, are you crowding out the other investments that you are supposed to do? Because my Minister of Finance still has needs for roads, hospitals, schools. So now what we're telling the Minister of Finance is, please, crowd out these other investments so that you can make space for climate finance, even though you're not a polluter. Then the question of who bears the cost of pollution comes into play. Now, normally, the story that we were being told in 2019 is that the carbon market could be a source for concessional finance eventually. The carbon markets today are in a very bad place, so that's out of the question. So then we sit and we ask ourselves, what else? GCF? Are we talking about speed? Because the objective is speed and scale. If it takes 4 years for GCF to approve a project, then you're not talking about speed and the scale that is of global ambition. So as a country that has all the political will in the world, the question that we ask ourselves is, for countries like Rwanda that are actually prepared, what next? Will it come? And unfortunately, the recent experience of international cooperation that we have is vaccines, where we were told, be ready and it will come, and it didn't come. You know, we got the crumbs. So the question is, for countries that are prepared, like Egypt, like Rwanda, and others that are ready, that have done all the things that it had to do to contribute to the solution, where are the concessional financing windows that allow us to do what we want to do, not what we're told to do, what we want to do at scale and speed? So, and that's the main reason why we're here today, because we haven't received a clear answer to that. I totally agree with what both Mr. Boli and the minister from Egypt have mentioned, and I just wanted to give you a practical example. In most African cities, there's a very fast rate of urbanization. One of the challenges that we all face is the issue of public transport. So in Rwanda, we've decided that the new fleet of buses for the city of Kigali are going to be e-buses, and we've been entrusted with finding a way to make it work. If you want to import a diesel bus today, it will cost you $120,000 per bus. If you want to import, because we don't produce buses, so we have to import. If you want to import an electric bus, it's $230,000. So meaning the cost of an e-bus is more than twice the cost of a diesel bus. Now, if you look at 7 year lifespan or 8-year lifespan, actually both models work because the e-bus has much less maintenance and of course does not consume fuel. Yeah. So in a medium-term perspective, if you have patient capital, it's not that the e-bus is loss-making, both actually make business sense, if I can put it like this. But obviously the upfront cost of the debt finance of the e-bus is much higher than the diesel bus, right? And the question is, in a context of limited resources, who provides the incentive for the bus operators to actually make the transition? They're not against the transition, but the cost on their balance sheet from the upfront cost is just too high. So when we're talking about incentives and fixing both an environmental issue and a developmental issue, this is a very simple case. But then in the context of a country that has a limited debt space and fiscal space, how do you make this operation work? My daughter likes to say, the math is not mathing, you know?
So what's the reaction so far? Which is winning?
So the reaction from the bus operators is very clear. They say, give me a subsidized interest rate on capital for the cost of capital, and we have a deal. So if instead of paying 16% for my diesel buses, you're able to give me a loan at 10 or 11 or 12%, then we have a deal. But where does the subsidy come from, right? In the US, I understand that, you know, they have means. We don't have similar means.
We do have means.
So where do we find the means to play the part that we want to play from a political will perspective, fixing a development challenge, but still bring on the private sector to be part of the solution?
No, I think this is a perfect example, and I think it's generally true of many aspects of energy transitions that we're moving from in a sense, an OPEX world where fuel costs are a big part of the overall cost of the energy system to a CapEx world where you have higher upfront costs but much lower maintenance and operational costs. And that means that the costs of financing become an absolutely critical indicator for the success of the whole venture. And that's, of course, particularly true in environments where the cost of capital is relatively high to begin with. I mean, we conducted some survey work with practitioners to understand the differences in the cost of capital across different countries. And the cost of capital for a solar project in emerging developing economies is going to be at least 2 times, probably 2 or 3 times higher than it is in advanced economies or China. So there is an absolutely crucial role here for efforts both on the policy side but also from the international side to help bring that down, because otherwise it's going to be a really uphill struggle.